Alright, when I say that today I'm going to taste one of the rarest and most expensive coffees in the whole world, you might assume that that means it's been pre-processed by the digestive tract of an animal of some sort. And I wouldn't fault you for assuming that, but mercifully for me, and probably sadly for you guys, today is not the day that I take that particular plunge. So last week, a farmer in Kona, Hawaii reached out to me and said, hey, we like your stuff, we like your personality, would you be interested in making us some tutorial videos, some how-tos, tips and tricks, that kind of thing, for all of our consumers, because we have a lot of people who are not necessarily in the specialty coffee industry, you know, they're not coffee nerds, but they really like our stuff, they like our story. Would you potentially help us out and make some content for us? And to be honest, at first I felt a little bit apprehensive about the whole thing because I am completely independent and nobody has ever offered me money or asked for an opinion or anything like that because I'm a nobody. Nobody cares what I think. And I say that in the most generous terms possible. But the idea of helping a small grower do better, you know, when I was in high school, I worked a little bit in the cherry industry for my uncle. And so I guess I have a little bit of a heart for farmers. So I said, you know what, I'd love to, on one condition. I have to like your coffee. So they sent me some. So the farm in question is Kona Earth, and they sent me 4 of these little 2-ounce bags, 3 in their medium roast, which is the lightest roast that they offer, and dark, medium, and light, that's all sort of relative to one's perspective, I guess. These would all be extremely light, I'm guessing, compared to the average Starbucks medium blend. But they sent me their lightest roast in their classic, premium, and pea berry, and these are essentially their 3 quality grades. And then they also sent me their pea berry in what they call their full city blend. This is their medium dark, so a little bit richer. I'm gonna do something different with that. For these 3, we're gonna do a simple cupping, but for a little bit of a curveball, I'm gonna add in some Olympia Coffee Morning Sun. I don't put a lot of stock in the tasting notes on bags of coffee. Sometimes they're accurate, sometimes they're not, but at least what Kona Earth is saying this should taste like and what Olympia Coffee is saying this should taste like are roughly in the same ballpark. They're not acid forward, they're not extremely fruity, they're more chocolatey, nutty, sweet, those kinds of flavors. And then I'm gonna do a shot of espresso with this stuff, as well as maybe we'll do an iced filter coffee. So let's see how it goes. All right, so my first impression was, oh wow, that is special. You should smell this. While my wife's thoughts were more, what do you think? So we are off to a good start. We will look at the differences between the 3 coffee grades from Kona Earth, but first, let's dive right into the tasting. Now, I said that I'm going to use a cupping to taste the 3 medium coffees, so what is that? Cupping is basically what it sounds like, coffee brewed in a cup. You can think of it like coffee from a French press, but unfiltered. It may sound strange for those who have never heard of it, but it is the industry standard for coffee tasting the world over, and used by professionals at every level of the production process to ensure quality, consistency, and taste. It's not the best way to drink coffee for enjoyment, but because it involves as little human skill or technique as possible, it is prized by professionals for being the most consistently unbiased method for tasting coffee. And here's how it's done. Coffee is weighed out on a scale for consistency. Because we are tasting coffee for comparison, we want to eliminate as much variation as we can between how each cup is prepared. The recipe I'm following is 60 grams of coffee per liter, a standard recipe you will find referenced all over the internet. Because the Chinese teacups I'm using are on the small side, and you can use any kind of cup you like, I'm going to reduce my recipe from 60 to 1000 down to 9 grams and 150 mils for each cup. If you would like me to make a standalone video on how to understand and use this ratio-based recipe, let me know in the comments and I'll add it to the queue. A good idea for coffee tasting is to do it blind. This is done by labeling the cups and the bags in advance and then having another person mix them up right before tasting so that you won't know what's what. Once weighed, the coffee is then ground coarsely, again just like a French press, and combined with hot water in a cup and left to steep for 4 minutes. After that time, the crust of floating coffee grounds are stirred to cause them to settle to the bottom of the cup, with any grounds that remain floating being scooped off with a pair of spoons.
The coffee is then left to sit again, and this time for 10 minutes, to let it cool down enough to be more easily tasted and to encourage any fine coffee particles to sink to the bottom of the cup. The coffee is then spooned from the cup and slurped into the mouth so as to spray the coffee across your tongue and help to aerosolize the flavors that can only be tasted by your nose, which is actually the majority of our sense of taste.
All right, let's start my right, your left. Here we go. All right, so on my initial taste through, this is my favorite, this might be my least favorite, and these two I think are pretty equal. So let me go through that again. And I think that is number 1. Wow, that's so different. But I think that these 3 are probably the Kona Coffee. That is interesting. Okay, so which one is which? Which one do I like best? There's a really interesting flavor here that reminds me of green tea. Now, of course, the flavor is predominantly, well, coffee, but on top of that, I'm getting this very tea-like acidity and grassiness that I've never tasted in a coffee before, and I've tried a lot of coffees. This is very interesting. I'm gonna say that this one here in the middle is number 2. I'm having a hard time here, guys, trying to figure out what's what. I don't know. I'm very tempted right now to look at the bottoms of these and figure out what's what. But I'm gonna say that based off my initial impression, I would say that this one is the pea berry, assuming of course that would be the most flavorful, the most interesting. It's hard to describe. It's got a grassiness and a nuttiness to it. There's hints of fruit, but they're very subdued, right? It's not a high acidity in the coffee, and it's not a super berry, cherry kind of a flavor. It's more nutty, grassy, kind of like herb and alfalfa, green tea, those kinds of flavors. I'm gonna go through these again, rapid fire, and just see what stands out to me again. I would guess these 3 are the Kona Coffee, and this is the Olympia. So that one does not have the grassiness. Yeah, that same flavor again. I can't put my finger on it. Really pleasing level of acidity. I'm gonna guess this one is the pea berry one, and the one on the end is 3. Let's take a look, see what's what. Yep, number 1. That is Olympia. Number 2, okay, so this one is the classic one. That's interesting. That one is the premium, and then this one is the pea berry. So what this is showing me is the difference between these is not necessarily showing a big difference in flavor for me. There is a difference, but it's not necessarily following the cost, if that makes sense. I actually want to just kind of drink these. That's really interesting. Across those 3 beans, I notice pretty much the exact same flavor profile to me. Very interesting results. Let's go on to some espresso and some iced filter coffee.
As I prepare the espresso, let me show you the difference between these 3 coffees. The classic roast is made from smaller beans, and you should know that smaller is a relative term. They aren't small compared to the average specialty coffee that you'll see for sale, and while there are imperfections in some of the beans, these are cosmetic only. And from the tasting we just finished, you know that these beans were actually my favorite by a narrow margin. The premium beans are where the word small starts to make sense, because I'm no James Hoffman, but these are the largest coffee beans I've ever seen. No imperfections or cosmetic flaws to be found here. These are the kind of beans that get photographed and filmed for ads. And finally, the pea berries. A coffee pea berry is formed when the coffee cherry, and yes, the fruit inside of which a coffee bean grows, is called a cherry, only forms one single seed or bean instead of the usual 2. This means that the beans are more round and usually more dense than other beans from the same harvest. Density has long been a measure of coffee quality because it directly translates to how flavorful the final roasted bean will be. Pea berries are very rare. The farmers over at Kona Earth said that they make up about 5% of any given harvest. The coffee I'm using for the final 2 recipes today is also a pea berry, but this one has been roasted a bit longer, what Kona Earth calls their medium dark, full city roast. Not at all a dark roast compared to major brands, but then again, most mass-produced coffee labeled dark or espresso roast has simply been burned to compensate for the fact that the beans didn't have a lot of flavor to begin with. Because high-quality beans have so much more flavor due to how they're grown, they do not need nearly as much roasting as lesser-quality beans and benefit from much lighter roast profiles. This is one of the reasons why labels of light, medium, or dark can seem so disconnectedly different between major mass-produced brands brands and small-scale specialty producers like Kona Earth. Specialty coffee producers would consider the dark roast level offered by major brands as completely burnt when applied to the high-quality beans they use and counterproductive in getting the best flavor. However, mass-produced companies would consider even many of the typical medium roast levels offered by small specialty producers as far too light for all but the most exclusive limited edition single origin coffees they sometimes release, most of their beans being far too lacking in natural flavor not to taste weak and watery with such a short roasting time.
Alright, my first shot of Kona Earth espresso. Cheers. Man. Hey, bud. Shh, quiet. Daddy's filming. One of the things that I've always read about Kona Coffee, and this is absolutely true about this espresso, is that it's not acidic, but it's not low acidic. It's this very balanced kind of mild acidity that makes this a very bright, but not overpoweringly bright flavor. And to be honest with you, this is one of the best espressos I've had in a long time. This is really good. But now I want to actually lengthen this with a little bit of water. My normal morning routine is to cut it 2-to-1 or even up to 3-to-1 with hot water as kind of a extra strong Americano. Hey bud, cheers. Good job. Nutty, robust, acidic, just really balanced. I think that's the thing that I keep coming back to with this coffee, is that it really isn't one thing. It's not acidity like a Kenyan coffee, or funk like an Ethiopian or something like that. It is just balanced. It's very balanced. I don't know if the specialty coffee industry is going to really fall in love with Kona Coffee, but I could see the average consumer really loving it because it's kind of one of these jack of all trade kind of flavors. There's nothing overly bitter about it. It's not overly acidic, but it definitely has a lot of flavor. One of the things that I kind of always struggle with is roast preference, because I think these beans actually are better with a little bit more development. This is the slightly darker, their full city roast. This is fantastic. This is great. So to wrap up the video, I'm gonna do this same blend as an iced filter coffee, more commonly known as a Japanese style iced coffee. You could think of it in terms of cold brew, except a lot more flavorful with a lot more acidity and, well, yeah, just a lot more flavor. So let me show you how to do that.
Okay, let me give you the recipe quickly, and then I will talk about the elephant in the room. If you know how to make a pour over, then this is extremely easy. Out of the total amount of water you would normally use, place 1/3 of your water as ice in the carafe and brew with only the remaining 2/3 as hot water. It also helps to grind a little bit finer than normal. When the hot coffee lands in the carafe, it will quickly melt the ice. Once the ice is gone, you will have a hot brewed, regular strength coffee, but one that has been rapidly chilled. This keeps all the volatile flavor compounds that can only be extracted through hot brewing in the coffee where we can enjoy them. But it gives us a brew that is cold enough not to over dilute and taste watery when poured over ice. Okay, so the elephant in the room is bias. Am I an unbiased reviewer? No, the simple answer is no, but the truth is there's no such thing as a truly unbiased person. There are things you can do to reduce the level of influence of certain factors, like tasting blind, but you can never remove bias completely because our opinions are the sum of our experiences. Part of what made me like the classic grade over the premium or peaberry was that it was my first ever taste of Kona coffee, and it made a powerful impression. Does it actually taste better to me on a pure neurochemical level than the other two grades? I mean, maybe. But even neurochemistry is influenced by our emotional perception. The old "nobody makes it like my mom used to make" comment comes to mind. And that statement probably isn't even true, because however good of a cook our mom was, there's almost guaranteed to be an even better recipe out there. But our emotional attachment to flavor is related to conscious and subconscious memory from our earliest years. No amount of double-blind tasting and complete ignorance of what is placed in front of you will change that we are formed, guided, and matured by our experiences. If I have a positive bias because I find Hawaiian coffee an interesting new thing, so will the average person who buys it for themselves. That's all part of the experience as a consumer. So maybe my bias actually makes my perception closer to what any other normal person would experience. People like things that they want to like more than those that they are indifferent to, and that lens of preference is the lens through which we experience everything in normal life. The trick is not to pretend that all or even most bias can be eliminated, or that because it can't be eliminated, it doesn't matter and don't do anything to minimize it at all. Both of those are foolish and false. The truth lies in doing what you reasonably can to minimize bias, and then simply tell the truth of what you experience in frankness and transparency.
Alright, well, I'm afraid this might be a little bit under-extracted. It can be a little bit tough to sometimes prejudge what your grind size is going to need to be, but I'm going to taste this anyways because sometimes I can kind of inform you as to what the coffee tastes like. Cheers. Oh man, so smooth, so just nutty and balanced acidity. There's some of that grassiness, that kind of green tea flavor that I was getting from the cupping earlier. Man, this is such a well-balanced coffee. That's the thing that I keep coming back to again and again and again, is that if you're looking for something to slap you in one area of flavor or another, or be really unique and bold and all those kinds of things, it's not going to be that. Kona Coffee, it seems to me, it's not defined by any one predominant flavor. I think for the average consumer, that's a really, really good thing. For some people who are trying to make content such as myself, you want things that are, wow, oh my gosh, interesting and crazy, but you know, sometimes for the average person, you just want really, really well-balanced, good-tasting coffee. It's not crazy acidic, it doesn't have no acidity, it's not overly nutty or overly fruity or funky or this, that, or the other thing. You want something that doesn't require you to sit there for 5 minutes and contemplate the flavors. You want something that is just, well, enjoyable. And I think if I was going to put one word to describe my experience with Kona Earth coffee, it would be, it's enjoyable. It's really enjoyable coffee. And pretty forgiving too, considering that I did not get the grind size on this right. I think it is under extracted. It's still not overly acidic. Yeah, I'm really impressed. Really impressed. So if you're in the market to try something new, give Kona a try. Cheers.